In our previous video, we took a look at how we can get streaming information from Azure OpenAI, but we used a console application, and realistically none of us are going to do that. So what we're going to do today is take a look at how we can get that working in a minimal API using .NET 7 and a React front end. Let's get cracking. Okay, so we are starting in the API, right? This is a stock standard minimal API. I've got a one endpoint for chat that we're mapping. Realistically, this is going to be a post because you will be receiving messages, but for today we're going to keep it as a get. We can see here that we've got one method where we've started implementing an OpenAI client. Now, when we're streaming responses, it's not just a simple go and wait for the API call to go do something and then come back with whatever you're ready. We need to be sending through data chunks to the HTTP response as they come along. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go in my get stream method. I'm going to go and add the HTTP response object. And I'm just going to call this response. And what we want to do first is add I think it's a text event stream content header. So I want to go response dot headers dot add content type text event stream. Okay, thank you, Copilot. No, we're not going to do any of that. That is the minimal we want to add over there, right? So that's pretty straightforward. But effectively, our prep work is done. So from an API perspective, this is very, very simple. The only thing we are sending back to the client when working with normal OpenAI is text. Right now you could consider markup, so you would always need to make sure that you're handling this on your client, especially when we're starting to work with our own data. It's not just as simple as take whatever text I'm getting and writing it to a div or whatever the case might be. We actually need to basically convert it into the objects we get in the API to JSON, stringify that, and then send it to the client, and then basically parse that string and start working with your JSON objects. We're going to go through that in detail, but for now we're just going to keep this as is. Normal OpenAI client. We are adding 100 words because we want to see what the streaming looks like. But for now, this is pretty straightforward. Now, once we're done, is effectively what we want to say is await for each var item. Okay. Chat update. Copilot didn't quite get it right there. Chat update in client await client dot get completion streaming async. Okay, and then we want to pass on our options that we had earlier, and then we should be good to go. So effectively what we're saying is then, all right, great, go and fetch the stream, and we want to first check if the content update is now. Now, if you remember in the video where we started looking at how this works, I'll pin it above so you can see what effectively happens is the response comes through, the whole object comes through, but not every property of the object actually gets completed. So in the case where it says, listen, this is the response from the assistant, the role is populated, but the actual content is not. So for our initial example, what we want to do is just say, all right, well, if the content is not null, then we can carry on. Okay, so if chat update dot content update is not null, then response dot body writer dot write async, and we need to encoding. Okay, right now Copilot sort of lost the plot there. We don't want to do that. Just grab this, and then we should be good. We need to await this. All right. So basically, all we're saying is go and get the bytes, a byte array from the content update, because obviously we need to send that as a byte array. But very importantly, every single time you want to actually get the client to consume what you're sending, you need to flush the body writer. Await response.bodywriter dot write async. Not write async, sorry, we want a full body writer dot sync, right? Simple as that. Now, from an API perspective, we're pretty much done, right? So when we get back, I'm going to jump into the client application quickly. It's a very simple React app, and then we're going to see how we need to set up the fetch API to consume this stream. Okay, so we're in our React app. This is very, very straightforward. We've got a very simple app. I've started just creating a bit of a fetch request for us. We've got a div. We've got a button that's going to go and fetch data for us, and we've got a paragraph which is containing our text state object. So most of it's pretty much like a normal fetch request. I'm going to go if response, if not response.ok, and not response.body. Cool, we can just throw an error, or we can just return for the sake of this video. Okay, and then we're going to close that out. But if there is a response and there is a body, then what we want to do, we don't want to just consume the body as is. We want to open up this body reader, right? Now, if you go look on the web, you'll find something called event source. I think this is very similar to that. It sort of reacts in the same way, but ultimately what we want to then do is just basically loop through the data that we're getting from the server response until we're done. So it looks like Copilot is pretty much on point. So I'm going to just take that from Copilot and we'll walk through it together. So first things first, the reader.read brings back this object where we can say it's either done or get a value. So this is one of the things that is quite nice from the Reader API. When you're using event sourcing, there are examples on the web where you actually need to send through your own finished token. So you need to write that to the server. You can ignore that when using this method. Cool. So what we first want to do is check if we're done. So if we're done, break. Remember, we're doing a loop, and we're just saying just loop until we actually exit the loop. So it's important to have your break. And we send through an encoded byte array to the client, so we need to decode that. Now, the one thing that Copilot messed up a little bit is we don't necessarily just want to replace our text value in our client. What we want to do is we actually want to append it every single time. So I'm going to go with text, and I'm just going to arrow function and then say text plus decoder, right? So that's pretty straightforward for us. So just to recap, because this is it, right? That's it. It's not as complicated as it sounds. We're doing a normal fetch request, response, we're checking the response, we're getting the reader. Now that's obviously the one thing that's a little bit different. And then we're literally just looping through the values that the reader is getting for us. So I'm going to quickly start the debugger, and I will see you guys again when it's running. Okay, so debugger is running. I apologize in advance. I am going to blind you guys now, but we can see here we've got the chat API as we said last time, and if we try that out and execute over here, you'll notice that it's going to just wait forever, and eventually it's going to come back with the whole text. Now, that's why we needed the client application. As we saw in the last section of the video, we just have this little button, and effectively what it's going to do, I'm going to press it, and it's going to fetch the chunks, and we'll see as the chunks come through from the server, it's going to start populating the text. Now, it does take a few seconds to run on my local environment, so I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you guys. All right, so that's looking good. As we can see, the data is coming through in chunks. As I said, we're just responding to text at the moment, so we don't need to do too much more from an API perspective or from a client perspective. What I'm going to do in the next video is actually show how we handle this internally. So when I'm actually building these apps, how do I handle it? Because we don't want the client to handle too much of the thinking. We want our logic to sit in our API. So we're going to take a look at how we actually leverage the API, the information coming back from the API in a way that it's easy for the client to understand. So thank you very much for joining. I hope this was informative, and I'll catch you in the next video.